Welcome to the Fourth Branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, said that we must especially beware of that small group of men who would clip the wings of the American ego in order to feather their own nest. Ignorance is the biggest threat to any democracy. It is, however, the ignorance of the ignorance which represents the greatest danger to a society. It is what turns an ignorant man into a lunatic. Thus lies the danger, the peril even of a man, a community, a state, a country, and yes, even a whole society. John F. Kennedy said, "The ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of a soul." Indeed, it does. We've seen it, haven't we? We've witnessed it. We are all living it today, are we not? All men are born ignorant. Many have chosen to stay and live in ignorance. Only a few recognize that the root of all evil is ignorance, and they have made the choice to be ignorant no more. Hello everyone, I am MD, and this is the Fourth Branch program. Today, we will continue the discussion on the 2018 election. It happened yesterday. We will look at what we call the morning after. Stay with me. We'll be right back to discuss what it means we do not discuss the result, the outcome, or who won, who lost, but rather what impacts the outcome of the elections have on us, on the country, on society at large. You don't want to go anywhere. This is a discussion you definitely don't want to miss. I'll be right back. Join me here on the Fourth Branch at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every Saturday. What does the morning after feel like? No, it's not a commercial for birth control pill. I'm referring to the state of the country after an unprecedented midterm election. Here is what we know so far. The Democrat Party has regained control of the House. The Republican Party has expanded control of the Senate, and there are a few races that are still too close to call. But we are not here to talk about the result. We are here to talk about the impact of the result in the country, on our lives, and on future generations. Although the Democrats have just begun to revel in taking back control of the House, we will take a look at that shortly. The outcome in general painted simultaneously a grim picture of the country and a promising perspective of the future. For the past 3 years, I wrote several articles exposing the Republican Party as a haven of and for racists, bigots, and the likes. Needless to attempt to convince you the backlash that I dared, pointing out the obvious. With Donald Trump jumping into the political arena 3 years ago, most Republicans, a great percentage of which make up this group, the racists, the bigots, and the likes, they used to hide in plain sight, discriminating against minorities at the workplace, on the street, at the school, and yes, even in stores that are patroned rather by blacks and other minority groups. But as I pointed out here in this program before, Donald Trump did not create those people. He did not invent racism. The only thing Donald Trump has done, he has opened the door for the millions of such individuals in the country who now feel emboldened to practice bigotry, racism in the open, and they feel entitled. Them be anyone who thinks or tells them otherwise. So Donald Trump is indeed a racist, a bigot. We know that, but we cannot fault Donald Trump to have created this environment. Way before Donald Trump, this environment has always existed. Yes, they were hiding. They were implementing, practicing. The Republican Party in general for the past few decades have been implementing policies, legislation, which clearly say that they are against minorities. So no, Donald Trump is not the source or the roots of the problem. Last night, I personally was saddened that I was vindicated in my analysis of a country still filled with millions of individuals who continue to believe the twisted views of others who do not look like them, to find out that I was correct. Yes, I have been writing about the Republican Party being a haven for and of racists. Yes, they all deny it. They have always seen exaggeration in that assessment. But came Donald Trump. And of course, in the media, there are so many justifications as to why Donald Trump has been so successful with a group of people who would not abandon him no matter what he does. And he has done a lot of outrageous, at times, beyond understanding as to how anyone, especially family men, family woman would continue to support that individual. I even asked the question to quite a few of them. Would you raise your children to be like Donald Trump? Would you want your children to emulate Donald Trump? Although a few of them had the balls to say yes, but we know deep down, no one individual, no sound-minded, no decent individual would want their children to be anything like Donald Trump. And yet, those individuals continue to provide support for Donald Trump. And there is only one logical reason. They identify with his racism, with his bigotry. And as far as they are concerned, they don't care that he is the president of the United States. In fact, they are happy that the president of the United States gave them cover. It is those very individuals who claim to be Christian. Yes, those individuals who go to church with a Bible and praying God, those same individuals who claim to have principles, values, yes, those very individuals came out in droves to support candidates with similar views, similar beliefs, and yes, a deep inclination to burn down the country if need be to preserve the political position to support Donald Trump. Country be damned. Last night was not a victory for the Democrat Party. No, it was not. It was, at the very least, a glimmer of hope for the United States of America, for a country which had been run like a banana republic for the past 2 years. With the Democrats in control of the House, it is hopeful the Trump administration will be held accountable, challenged when necessary, the way the framers of the Constitution intended our government to be. One must not, however, mistake a small victory for the Democrat as a sign that the country is all of a sudden filled with decent, thoughtful Republicans. No, it is not at all. If anything, the very small victory is a sign that the Republican Party has completely moved away from any principle it claims to have. Yes, the Republicans who condemned Bill Clinton for having an affair with an intern in the White House in 1998, the Republicans who called themselves Christian and were disgusted by such act, are the very same individual today who have not just voted for Donald Trump, probably the worst kind of man kind has to offer, the worst that the presidency has had since its existence. But they have steadfastly supported him, cheered him, yes, and even participated in mocking victims of sexual assault. Yes, those individuals, those Christians, those Republicans who have principles, that those are the same individuals who last night came out in droves in support of those candidates who give shelter to Donald Trump. Those are the very same individuals who went to the poll last night to affirm once again publicly the ideal they claim to have, or of just for chicanery, the principles they have argued decades for they've never embraced, the Christian values they've been promoting, they've never believed in. That was the message the country received from Republicans last night. Put simply, Republicans stand for nothing of what they've been claiming for decades. They stand for absolutely nothing. Not Christian principle, not conservative principle, not fiscally conservative principle. No, they do not stand for any of that. They just say it because it sounds good. They like the label because it makes them feel better than the Democrats. It's just words, but their actions clearly indicate none of those values resides on those Republicans. They've proven it time and again. For 2 years now, at first, the media made excuses for those Republicans and say, well, those were a bunch of people who were very angry at where the country was going, the direction the country was going. And the excuses keep changing and changing. But there is only one thing that still has not changed. Donald Trump is still the bigot, the racist that he is. He's still making outrageous statements, and is still supported by those very same individuals. His approval rating since 2015 has been around 40%, and it still is the very same individual. No, it's not because of their belief that the country was going in the wrong direction. It's not their belief because that they didn't feel that the economy was good, was bad. It's not because of any such thing. It's because Donald Trump represents the very individual that they are. Racists, bigots, and the likes. And they identify with Donald Trump. So they want to keep him as long as possible. And anything that they ought to do, they have to do to shield Donald Trump, they will do it because that's probably the last hope that they have to continue to act and behave in bigotry, in racism, and they get covered in return by Donald Trump. So yes, it is not about anything other than, unfortunately, it is bad news for the country, because that translates into a grim future for the United States of America. In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies, presenting to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a recent survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore. What does it mean? What does the morning after mean? I stated earlier, it is not a commercial for birth control. One thing is today certain, that, or at least we hope, that the Democrats, having taken control of the House, will get the country to function as it was intended by the framers of the Constitution. They created 3 equal branches of government, and the legislative branch, which is Congress and the Senate, one of the job that they have, I would say principal job, is to keep a check on the executive branch. If that doesn't happen, the country is run just like any authoritarian government, any dictatorship. No difference whatsoever. Yes, it was still called the United States of America. But as people who have traveled the world, who have contacts around the world, you would know that the world doesn't see the United States of America as the beacon of life, doesn't see the United States as the place to look up to for guidance in the world. Now, for those who do not care, it doesn't matter. But for those who understand that the United States is not an island, cannot work independently of the rest of the world, know that it is important to have allies around the world, across the world. Even Canada, our next door neighbor, cannot be today considered as an ally to the United States. As a friend, I should say. And the reason is because while the Republicans, for reasons that are beyond logic, well, actually it's not, they do not care as long as all other Republicans in the House, in the Senate, continue to shield Donald Trump, continue to defend Donald Trump, continue to turn their eyes, their head the other way. As far as those people are concerned, those candidates, those representatives, they're just fine. One have to ask the question, what's the point of becoming a representative for the United States of America if you cannot stand and uphold the Constitution that you took an oath to do? And for the past 2 years, that's what Republicans in general in the House have been doing. Some even worse, people like Devin Nunes, Jim Jordan, Trey Gowdy, they all been doing things that undermine the institution of the United States. Not just the Department of Justice, not just the FBI, but the very foundation of the United States have been undermined by the very individuals we elected to make certain that the United States keep its integrity, not just here locally, domestically, but across the world. Yes, those very individuals. Now we know the idea of Republicans defending the nations, or the Republican being patriot. It's a word that they like to use, just like Republicans like to call themselves Christian, conservative. They like to call themselves Christian. They like to, I don't know if they still do, like to think of themselves fiscally conservative. Now, you take any of those words, They sounds great, great label, but take what goes with those labels, they're doing just the opposite. So it is a slight comfort that starting January at the very least, we will have what the framers of the Constitution intended for our government, that the legislative branch would put a check on the executive branch. Now, you may be a Trump supporter, but you cannot deny the fact that the country has been run without any checks. Scandals, corruptions have been running rampant in the Trump administration. Trump ran under this umbrella of draining the swamp. It sounds good because, hey, words always do. Soundbite always sounds great. But no one who is sound-minded would believe that Donald Trump has any interest in the United States of America. And that's what makes the Republican legislators even worse, because you don't have to be a genius to see that. Donald Trump couldn't care less about the United States of America. We know that. Everything that Donald Trump does for the sake of Donald Trump, for the sake of his family, for the sake of money, for the sake of profit. And it shows. He doesn't hide it. And that's what makes it even all the more frustrating that you have a Republican Congress that instead of doing the job for which they were elected, they rally behind Donald Trump. They're doing cover-up for him. People like Devin Nunes, Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, Trey Gowdy, all those people, they know better because they're legislators. They know how the whole process works. And we're not talking about politics here, because there is a big difference between someone trying to get a piece of legislation done or trying to kill a piece of legislation by the opposing party. There is a big difference to now literally colluding with the executive branch to hide scandal, to hide corruption. This is not politics. Now, the reason we don't see an uproar in the Republican Party with all those things happening for the past 2 years is because there is no Republican Party. Now there is a Trumpublican Party, and all those people that I just mentioned, a bunch of others, Lindsey Graham, I mean, the list is, you can say pretty much most Republicans have abandoned the task for which they were elected. And what makes the matter even worse is the fact that it becomes very clear that their concern is not the country either. Their concern has become more about themselves. So what happened last night, the morning after, this morning gives a glimmer of hope that the country wakes up this morning thanks to the effort of really quite a lot of people who have stood up. And by a lot of people, we don't really mean a lot of Republicans. Well, then again, maybe I should make the distinction. A lot of Republicans who have stood up against the Trumpublians and managed to make certain that the Democrats takes control of the House. Now, I'm not here to argue about Democrats being better than Republicans. This is not what the argument is about. Because had the Republicans, now Trumpublicans, done the job for which they were elected, which is to put a check on the Trump administration, we could have said with really very little reserve that this is the first time that you have had an administration that walked into the presidency, that took over a presidency of a country that's doing well and then makes it better. All this while that the Republican legislature would be keeping a check on him. The number of people who've been indicted in the Trump administration, the amount of scandals that have been going on in the Trump administration. Now you have, for instance, just an example, Kellyanne have violated the idea of being a neutral individual and came out in a number of occasions and do things that are not acceptable. And yet there is absolutely nothing that had happened to her. Instead, it's almost like, hey, you are encouraged to do this kind of thing. If you remember, on Monday night, it got even worse. On the stage was the secretary, the White House press secretary, and Kellyanne. This is a no. This is an ethic violation. So it wasn't, first, it happened with Kellyanne. As if that's not enough, now they brought the White House press secretary. So the Trump administration doesn't even hide to violate norms, standard, and ethics that make the United States of America a model for other countries to follow, to emulate. They don't even hide that. It's not even being done behind the scene. In plain sight, bigotry is practiced. In plain sight, racism is practiced. In plain sight, ethic violation. So yes, it is a glimmer of hope the morning after to take a look at and say, thank God that happened. Anyone who wakes up today and not feel that at least there is some hope that the Trump administration will have to answer for the scandals, for the corruption in the administration. And it is the right thing to happen because that's what makes the United States a model across the world. That's why we're able to go elsewhere and say, we would like you to copy our system of democracy. But today, the United States of America cannot say that because for the past 2 years, the United States resemble a banana republic. We cannot tell other people we would like you to look at how we run things. Because even we here in the United States of America recognize that this is not a country we would like to see going forward. But don't get me wrong, Donald Trump is not solely responsible for the problem. The framers of the Constitution anticipated those kind of problems. They anticipated there could be a rogue president, a rogue agent sitting in the Oval Office. That's why they have the structure the way that it is. That we have the legislative branch whose job is to rein in on the executive branch when the executive branch running amok. Now, the problem that we have, the reason we're talking about that is because Republican who was in control of both houses since 2010, they have abandoned their job, the task for which they were elected. That's why we say, thank God that we wake up this morning and it is a different day. Because if you love the United States of America, if you love the country, not say that you do, because as I just pointed out to you, Republicans have been doing a lot of that. They Christian conservative, they fiscally conservative, they are Christian, they lack labels. I'm not asking that because saying you love the country is easy to say. Because who is going to say otherwise? Ask Donald Trump. He would tell you he loved the country. But look at his action vis-a-vis the country and tell me if you construe that as someone who loves the country. Yes, saying the word is easy. So I'm talking to those who actually love the country. If you love the country, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, you should like the idea that you wake up this morning and you know that Congress will no longer be in the hands of the Republicans. Because anyone who is a patriot, anyone who cares enough about the United States of America should feel more or less. We don't know what the Democrats are going to do, whether they're really going to make certain that not only Donald Trump is held accountable for all the scandal and the corruption, but also implement policies that can help move the country forward. We don't know any of that. But it is a glimmer of hope that at the very least we know one thing for certain. That Republicans who have not been doing anything for the country would no longer be in control of the House. If you have a car that you cannot drive to work because every time you start the car, it stops with you in the middle of the road, you have to call a cab, you have to call Uber to get to work, it is time to get rid of that car and get a better one. You may not be able to afford a new one, but it's time to get a better one. So yes, it feels better to wake up this morning and know that the Republicans are no longer in control of the House. You don't have to be a genius. You just have to love the country. You just have to be a patriot for you to say, you know what? It is a very good thing that the Republicans are no longer in control of the House. Because we need check and balances. And for 2 years, that is a very long time. For 2 years, not a single investigation into Trump corruption, Trump scandal. It's like any corrupt government. So we could not possibly go to any government in the world and call them corrupt, because the past 2 years have been as bad here in the United States as it is or anywhere that we would want to point fingers to. So we were no longer a model for any country to follow. In fact, if you know what's been talked about around the world, you would already be aware that we are a mockery in the world today. Not just because of the kind of thing that Donald Trump said. In fact, they find it sometimes funny, insulting, funny, etc. But they find the United States no longer fit the role of a leader of the world. Because here in the United States, American Trumppublicans couldn't care less about how low that they have brought the country, how much they have plunged the country into a situation where we talk about the United States of America. It is sad, but we have hope this morning that the morning after feels better because we know we have hope. There is hope for the United States of America that starting January 2019 rather, the Trump administration will be held accountable for the type of action he's been making, he's been doing, the type of action that's been literally diminishing the value of the United States, the importance of the United States on the world stage. So, yes, Trumppublicans, you may not like the idea because you probably do not care about the United States of America. And it shows. But for the rest of us who love the United States of America, for the rest of us who are patriots, for the rest of us who are sound-minded, it is necessary to check, to place a check on any administration, any president needs to be reined in order to preserve the institutions that we have. That is absolutely necessary. It doesn't matter how great a president is. The president needs to be reined in. Otherwise, the country is no different than any dictatorship. The country is no different than any authoritarian regime in the past 2 years. That's all we had. That's why the country has been so frustrated. Yes, Donald Trump language is outrageous because for someone to be president of the United States and not be able to be considered as a role model for children here in the country, this has to give you pause. Now, you can argue back and forth between Democrat and Republican and all this jazz, but to have a president, the president of the United States, who would want to emulate that? Would you want your children to emulate Donald Trump? Would you want your children to be like Donald Trump? Would you want your children to speak like Donald Trump? Would you want your children to behave like Donald Trump? Now, for all the decent, sound-minded people out there that understand the importance of preserving the integrity of this nation, I'm going to make one call to you to make certain that Donald Trump in 2020, that what he had, that's all he had. Because it's time to clean the government of this type of problem. Our country deserves better. Now, for those millions of people who do not really love the United States of America, who would not care the United States of America is burned down just to support Donald Trump, let me put it in a simpler way. The day of reckoning is coming. Join me here on the 4th branch at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every Saturday.
We are not going to turn over the conservative movement to a con artist who is telling people one thing but has spent 40 years sticking it to working Americans and now claims to be their champion. We are not going to turn over the conservative movement to a con artist who is telling people one thing but has spent 40 years sticking it to working Americans and now claims to be their champion.
What if hip-hop never existed? Do you think there'd be as many heads screaming out, stop snitching? What if Adam and Eve ain't eat the fruit? You think we'd be able to see the truth?
I'm not going to try to get into the mind of Donald Trump because I don't think there's a whole lot of space there. I think he's a kook. I think he's crazy. I think he's unfit for office. And I'm a Republican and he's not. He's not a conservative Republican. He's an opportunist. He could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and 25 or 30% of the people would still follow him because he gives voice to their anger and their frustration. But he's not fit to be President of the United States.
I'm telling you, Michael Jordan himself was right here in my McDonald's. I fixed him the very first McJordan special. Right, Bill. I did. I took a quarter-pound of pure beef, smoked bacon, cheese, and some of my favorite barbecue sauce, and I named it the McJordan Special.
Bill, the sandwich, definitely great.
Yeah, but you got the cooling with that story.
But it's true.
How you doing, Bill?
Hi, Michael. Michael.
The McJordan Special for a limited time.
I do thank you for spending the time with me. We will return tomorrow at the same time. We will continue our discussion. If you recall, before the 2018 midterm election, we were talking about the benefits that Mitch McConnell proposed to cut in order to make up for the huge $1.5 trillion tax cut that they had legislated for large corporation and wealthy individual. We will continue the conversation tomorrow, and I believe that we were at the point that we were talking about the welfare system. So join me tomorrow at the same time, and we will try to continue with that conversation, and hopefully that will provide you with some more ammunition to understand the impact of legislations, the impact of events in the news, and how that may affect not just your lives today, but also those of future generation. Once again, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great afternoon. The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.